Imagine you call a travel agent, right? You want to book a cruise. And the agent looks up the itinerary and tells you the trip costs $5,000.
Which is, a pretty big chunk of change.
Right. But then they sigh and say, I really wish you had called yesterday because they were running a 24-hour special and this exact same cruise was only $4,000.
Oh, I would just feel sick to my stomach.
Exactly. The urge to book that trip just completely vanishes. I mean, you hang up. You aren't about to pay a $1,000 penalty just because you were a day late.
Yeah, it feels like an absolute ripoff.
Right. But now let's imagine the exact same scenario, just, slightly tweaked. You call the agent and the cruise is still $5,000.
Okay, still 5,000.
Yeah. But this time the agent says, you are incredibly lucky you called today. Yesterday, this cruise was $6,000, but today it's on a flash sale for $5,000.
Oh, wow. Suddenly you feel like a financial genius.
Exactly. You hand over your credit card immediately, just completely thrilled with your bargain. But think about it. The dollar amount, the $5,000, is identical in both scenarios.
Yeah, the actual value of the money leaving your bank account hasn't changed by a single cent.
Not a cent, yet your entire behavioral response was dictated entirely by an emotional anchor.
And that is like the exact reason why mastering personal finance is so incredibly difficult for most people.
It really is.
We tend to think of finance as this cold, rational realm of numbers on a spreadsheet. But the reality is that every single financial decision you make is filtered through a very human, very flawed emotional wiring.
Which brings us to the mission for today's deep dive. We are going to provide you, the listener, with a comprehensive shortcut guide to mastering your money.
And we're going to do that by bridging the gap between that messy emotional psychology and the actual mathematical tools of wealth building.
Right. And we have pulled together a massive stack of research for this. We're talking government frameworks from the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, the CFPB, and the Department of Financial Protection and Innovation, the DFPI.
Plus, we've got university financial literacy materials from LSU and credit data from Equifax UK.
Yeah, and some really high-level institutional strategies from Fidelity, DBS Bank, and T. Rowe Price. So we have a lot of ground to cover.
Okay, let's unpack this, because before anyone can conquer their wallet, they really have to conquer their own brain.
You really do. I mean, you can have the most beautifully optimized investment portfolio in the world or, the most rigorous spreadsheet.
Sure.
But none of it will work if you are flying blind, just driven by these psychological illusions. That cruise ship example, which comes from psychologist Dan Gilbert, perfectly illustrates what we call a money optical illusion. Right, it's like those visual puzzles, right, where you have two lines drawn on a piece of paper. They are the exact same length, but because one has arrows pointing outward and the other has arrows pointing inward, your brain just screams that one is longer.
Yes, exactly.
You can literally take out a ruler, measure them, and intellectually know that it's a trick, but your eyes still see one as longer. And our brains do the exact same thing with retail pricing.
Oh, all the time.
You walk into a store and you see a price tag with a wildly high number crossed out in red ink and a lower number written below it. You know it's a marketing gimmick.
You know the item was probably never actually sold at that higher price.
Exactly. But it still works. You still get that dopamine hit of feeling like you beat the system.
And it goes so much deeper than just retail tricks, too. One of the most fascinating concepts in the research is how profoundly our childhood experiences dictate our financial habits today.
Usually without us even realizing it.
Right. The institutional research refers to this as the car seat analogy, which I think is just a brilliant way to conceptualize invisible habits.
I honestly found myself evaluating my own life with this one. So the analogy paints a picture of a father driving his 3 kids to school.
Okay.
One morning, his teenager asks from the passenger seat, "Dad, why do we always sit in these exact same seats? Like, the oldest is in the front, the middle child is directly behind her, and the youngest is behind the dad."
Which is a pretty standard setup.
Right. But the dad stops and really thinks about it. And he realizes that a decade ago, when the youngest was an infant in one of those heavy, cumbersome baby carriers, it was just physically easier for his back to swing the carrier into the seat right behind the driver's side door.
Oh, that makes total sense.
Yeah. So that simply became the baby's designated spot. And the older kids just filled in the empty space around it. Now, 10 years have passed. They're all teenagers. Anyone can comfortably sit anywhere.
But they're still rigidly conforming to a physical layout that was dictated by a baby carrier that hasn't existed for a decade.
Exactly. It perfectly captures the absurdity of our routines. We just keep sitting in the remaining seats without questioning the origin of the layout.
And financially, we do this constantly. Like, did you grow up in a household where money was tight and asking for things always led to an argument?
That's a super common one.
Right. So now, as an adult with a stable income, you might find yourself completely avoiding your bank statements just because the mere act of looking at money triggers that old, deep-seated anxiety.
Or conversely, maybe you grew up with a lot of scarcity. So now that you have a good salary, you subconsciously spend every dime you make to soothe that old feeling of deprivation.
Exactly. You are sitting in a financial car seat that you outgrew years ago.
And that anxiety response actually explains another massive trap the sources highlighted, the traffic jam phenomenon.
Oh, this one is so relatable.
It really is. Imagine you are driving home and you hit a wall of bumper-to-bumper traffic on the highway. You pull up your GPS, and it clearly states that the fastest route home is to simply stay on the highway and wait out the congestion.
But you take the next exit anyway.
You always do. You opt for a series of winding back roads that you know will add 30 minutes to your commute. Why do we do that? Because sitting perfectly still in traffic feels agonizing.
It's the worst. Driving on a back road, even in the wrong direction, feels like you are doing something. The research notes that for humans, action reduces anxiety.
Action reduces anxiety. That is such a critical insight into human behavior.
It really is. The short-term psychological relief of moving lowers your cortisol levels, even though you are actively sabotaging your ultimate goal of getting home efficiently.
Right.
Now translate that to your retirement accounts. The stock market takes a sudden dip. The news is panicking. You feel a massive spike of anxiety.
So you log into your account and you sell your investments.
Exactly. You get that immediate, soothing wave of relief because you took action to protect yourself.
Yeah.
But mathematically, all you did was lock in your losses and drastically delay your long-term financial destination.
But wait, let me ask you this. If these instincts are so deeply hardwired into our biology, is simply knowing about them actually enough to stop us from falling for them?
That is the big question, isn't it?
Yeah, because like the optical illusion, even if I measure the lines with a ruler, my eyes still see them differently. If I know I'm an emotional creature, do I ever truly outgrow these illusions?
What's fascinating here is that the goal isn't to stop feeling the emotion.
Yeah.
You can't just turn off your biology. The goal is to build a gap between the emotion and the subsequent action.
Okay, a gap.
Yeah. There's this brilliant reference in the materials to Obi-Wan Kenobi in Star Wars
Oh, nice.
when he waves his hand and uses a Jedi mind trick on the stormtroopers. He notes that the Force can have a strong influence on the weak-minded.
Right, right.
Well, when it comes to money, everyone likes to think they are the Jedi Master. We all want to believe we are perfectly rational, objective decision makers. Nobody wants to admit they're the weak-minded stormtroopers.
Yeah, it's definitely a blow to the ego to admit a marketing department can play you like a fiddle.
Exactly. But the very first non-negotiable step to financial security is admitting that you are, in fact, driven by emotion. You are a stormtrooper.
Embrace your inner stormtrooper.
Pretty much. Once you accept that you have these biases, you stop relying on sheer willpower to make good choices, and you start building external systems to protect yourself from your own impulses.
And that system is a budget, which honestly is a word that carries its own massive psychological baggage.
Absolutely.
For a lot of people, a budget feels like a financial diet. It feels restrictive, it feels punitive, and like it's just designed to make you feel guilty about buying a coffee.
Which is exactly why we need to completely reframe the concept. A financial plan is not a punishment. It is a GPS for your money.
I love that framing.
If you are driving across the country, you don't just type in your destination, hit go, and then close your eyes for 3 days. You constantly glance at the GPS to route around unexpected road closures, construction, or storms.
Right.
A budget operates exactly the same way. It is a dynamic tool you consult regularly so you can route your resources around the unexpected realities of life.
And the sources provide a very specific destination to plug into that GPS, the 50-30-20 rule. This is like a baseline mathematical framework for organizing your income.
Right, the 50-30-20 rule.
The premise is that 50% of your after-tax income goes to your needs, 30% goes to your wants, and 20% goes to savings.
It creates boundaries without completely starving your present self.
Yeah.
The needs are your absolute non-negotiables, right? Like rent or your mortgage, basic groceries, keeping the lights on, and minimum debt payments.
And the wants are everything else. Dining out, entertainment, streaming subscriptions, vacations.
Yeah. And then that 20% savings bucket is the engine for building your future.
But within that savings bucket, there is a distinction that I think fundamentally changes how people experience financial stress.
Yeah.
It's the difference between an emergency fund and a sinking fund.
Yes, that distinction is crucial.
We hear emergency fund all the time, but the Fidelity guidelines are very specific. This should be 3 to 6 months of essential expenses, kept in a completely separate, easy access liquid account.
Notice they say essential expenses, not your full salary.
Right. Just the bare minimum you need to keep a roof over your head and food on the table if you lose your job. And keeping it separate is key, so you aren't constantly tempted to dip into it when you just look at your checking account balance.
And that separation protects the true purpose of the fund. It is a shock absorber for catastrophic life events. A sinking fund, on the other hand, is for the inevitable, anticipated expenses that we somehow always pretend are surprises.
Like what?
Well, the holidays happen every single December. You know your car will eventually need new tires. A sinking fund is a separate bucket where you proactively save a small amount each month for those specific predictable events.
Because if you don't have a sinking fund for the new tires, you end up draining your emergency fund to buy them.
Exactly.
And then when a true emergency hits, the fund is empty.
Precisely. The sinking fund protects the emergency fund.
But let me push back on the 50-30-20 framework for a second here.
Go for it.
If I am someone dealing with an irregular income, or, if I'm living in a city where rent is just astronomical and eats up 60% of my paycheck, looking at a rigid rule that tells me I absolutely must put 20% into savings feels completely out of touch.
It can feel very discouraging.
Yeah, it feels like a standard I am destined to fail, which just makes me want to abandon the GPS entirely.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the exact percentages of 50-30-20 actually matter far less than the behavioral muscle memory you are building.
Okay, the muscle memory.
Right. If you run the numbers and you can only afford to save 5% right now, then your rule is 65-35. The real magic of this framework isn't the specific math, it is the habit of paying yourself first.
Paying yourself first.
It shifts your entire psychological approach.
Yeah.
Most people save whatever happens to be left over at the end of the month, which, due to human nature, is usually nothing.
Right, because we always find something to spend it on.
Exactly. The framework forces you to treat your savings goal exactly like your rent or your electricity bill. It is a non-negotiable payment you make to your future self before you fund your current lifestyle.
You pay your future self before anyone else. I like that. But even with the best muscle memory, emergencies can hit before the shock absorber is fully built.
They absolutely can.
And when that happens, people inevitably turn to credit cards or loans to survive. And debt introduces what is arguably the single most powerful mathematical force in finance. But in this case, it is working against you.
Compound interest. It is the engine of wealth, but when applied to debt, it is an absolute destroyer.
The sources from Equifax break down the mechanics of this, and it's crucial to understand how it works without, getting bogged down in algebraic formulas.
Right. Let's keep it simple.
When you carry a balance on a credit card, you aren't just paying a flat fee to borrow that money. You are charged interest on the principal amount. But the next month, if you haven't paid it off, the credit card company charges you interest on the original amount plus the interest they charged you last month. You are paying interest on your interest.
It is a snowball rolling down a mountain, gathering mass and speed every single day until it becomes an avalanche.
And that compounding effect is exactly why a seemingly manageable $2,000 emergency expense can spiral into a decade-long financial crisis if you are only making the minimum payments.
Which is why getting out of that trap has to be priority number one. And the materials highlight two distinct strategies for attacking debt: the avalanche method and the snowball method.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because these two methods are the perfect showdown between the cold math of wealth building and the messy psychology of human behavior.
They really are. Let's look at the avalanche method first.
Yeah, so the math dictates that you list all your debts, make the minimum payments on everything, and throw every single extra dollar you have at the debt with the highest interest rate.
Makes sense.
Once that high interest debt is gone, you move to the next highest. Purely mathematically, the avalanche method is the fastest and cheapest way to get out of debt.
Unquestionably. By attacking the highest interest rate, you are stopping the fastest growing snowball from compounding further. It minimizes the total amount of money leaving your pocket.
But the snowball method throws the math out the window.
Completely out the window.
With the snowball, you ignore the interest rates completely. You list your debts from the smallest total balance to the largest, you pay the minimums on everything, and you attack the smallest balance with everything you have.
Okay.
When that tiny debt is gone, you take the money you were paying toward it and roll it into the next smallest balance. And honestly, considering everything we just discussed about how emotionally driven we are, the snowball method seems vastly superior for actual human beings.
Behavioral economists largely agree with you. I mean, the avalanche method makes perfect sense for a spreadsheet, but spreadsheets don't get depressed. Spreadsheets don't experience fatigue.
Exactly. If I have a massive high-interest student loan, chipping away at it for 2 years without seeing the balance noticeably drop is demoralizing.
It feels like you're getting nowhere.
It feels like I'm bailing out a sinking ship with a teaspoon. I'm going to give up. But if I use the snowball method and I can completely eliminate a small medical bill or a store credit card in just 2 months.
You get a massive psychological dopamine hit.
Yes, I actually crossed something off the list. It proves the system works and it gives me the momentum I need to keep going.
It leverages our need for immediate reward to sustain a long-term goal. Now, while we are on the topic of escaping debt, the Department of Financial Protection and Innovation issued a very stark warning in their materials regarding debt settlement companies.
Oh, yeah. You hear these advertised everywhere. These are the services that promise to aggressively negotiate with your credit card companies to reduce your total debt by half or settle it for pennies on the dollar.
Right. They market themselves as a magic lifeline. But you need to understand the underlying mechanism of how they operate.
How does it actually work?
Usually, these companies instruct you to completely stop paying your creditors and instead send a monthly payment directly to them, which they hold in an account.
Wait, they tell you to stop paying?
Yes, they wait until your accounts go into default, which absolutely obliterates your credit score. Then, they use that defaulted status as leverage to try and force the creditor to settle for a lump sum.
Meanwhile, because you've defaulted, you could be sued by your creditors, your wages could be garnished, and your credit is ruined for years.
And on top of all that, the debt settlement companies charge exorbitant fees, often 15 to 20% of your total enrolled debt, regardless of whether they actually succeed in settling it.
That is wild.
The DFPI strongly advises that consumers approach this with extreme caution. If you are overwhelmed, your first step should always be reaching out to a certified, nonprofit credit counseling agency or calling your lenders directly to negotiate a hardship plan.
Okay, so let's say you've navigated all of this. You've accepted your emotional blind spots, you've built your GPS, and you've systematically dug your way out of high-interest debt.
You're in a good spot.
Now, it is time to flip the script. You get to take that terrifying, compounding snowball of interest and make it roll in your direction. This is where investing comes in.
And this is where we encounter the biggest misconception in personal finance, the idea that you need a massive salary to build wealth.
You really don't.
The most critical asset you have as an investor is not your income. It is your time.
The math Equifax provided on this is just staggering. Imagine two people. Right, we'll call them person A and person B.
Okay, person A and B.
Person A gets their first job at age 20 and immediately starts saving £100 a month. They do this every month for exactly 10 years. By age 30, they've put in £12,000 of their own money.
10 years, 12 grand. Got it.
Then they stop entirely. They don't add another cent. They just let the money sit and grow until they retire at age 60.
All right, now what about person B?
Now, person B decides they want to enjoy their 20s, so they wait until age 30 to start. To make up for lost time, person B saves £100 a month every single month for 30 solid years until they reach 60.
So let's look at the math. Person B invested a total of £36,000 out of their own pocket compared to person A's $12,000.
Right. But at age 60, person A, the one who stopped contributing at age 30, ends up with over £367,000.
Wow.
Person B, who saved 3 times as much of their own money over 3 decades, only ends up with £217,000.
That is a £150,000 difference.
Generated entirely because person A gave their money a 10-year head start to compound. The interest bred more interest, which bred more interest, operating completely independently of their actual contributions.
Which perfectly illustrates why waiting to invest until you feel quote-unquote rich enough guarantees you will work harder for less money. The institutional experts at T. Rowe Price recommend a specific target, the 15% anchor. The goal is to invest 15% of your gross salary for retirement. And the key detail here is that this includes your employer match.
Oh, that's a relief. So if your company offers a 401k match of up to 5%, you only need to contribute 10% of your own money to hit that anchor.
Exactly.
But the crucial question is, where does that money actually go? The sources break down two primary vehicles for everyday investors: mutual funds and index funds.
Right.
Think about it like trying to navigate across a massive, complex city. An actively managed mutual fund is like hiring a premium private chauffeur.
Okay, a chauffeur.
You are paying a high fee, sometimes 1 or 2% of your total portfolio every year, because this chauffeur is a supposed expert.
Mhm.
They are constantly monitoring traffic, trying to find hidden shortcuts, weaving through alleyways, all in an attempt to get you to your destination faster than the average driver. Sometimes they find a brilliant shortcut and you see great returns, but often they get stuck in a dead end, and whether they beat the traffic or not, you still have to pay their exorbitant fee.
Actively managed funds rely on high-priced human analysts trying to outsmart the stock market. But an index fund operates entirely differently.
Exactly. An index fund is like taking a highly reliable public train.
Crane.
It doesn't look for shortcuts. It doesn't weave through traffic. It just passively follows the tracks that are already securely laid out, like tracking the 500 largest companies in the S&P 500 or the top 50 in the Nifty 50.
Right.
Because there is no expensive chauffeur trying to outsmart the system, the fees are practically microscopic, often less than 0.1%. You aren't trying to beat the market. You are simply participating in its overall historic growth.
And we really need to emphasize why those fees matter so much. A 1% difference in fees between a mutual fund and an index fund doesn't sound like a lot.
No, it sounds tiny.
But because of compound interest, that 1% fee is constantly eating away at your growth over 30 years. It can literally cannibalize hundreds of thousands of dollars of your potential wealth.
And participating in that overall market growth is far more secure than our panic-driven brains want us to believe. The T. Rowe Price data provided the ultimate anti-anxiety statistic for long-term investors.
Oh, I love this stat.
It's amazing. Since 1926, through a century of world wars, Great Depressions, and housing market crashes, large U.S. stocks have never experienced a negative return over any 15-calendar-year period.
Let that sink in. Never.
Never. If you bought in and simply left your money alone for 15 years, you never lost your initial investment.
This raises an important question, though. If we know that we are emotional stormtroopers who panic during traffic jams, how do we guarantee that we actually leave the money alone for 15 years?
Right. How do we protect us from ourselves?
How do we stop ourselves from logging in and selling when the news gets scary? The universal answer across all our expert sources is automation.
You remove the human element entirely.
Exactly. You set up your payroll or your bank accounts so that your 15% contribution is automatically routed directly into your chosen index funds the day you get paid, before you ever even see it in your checking account. Out of sight, out of mind. You don't have to summon the willpower to make a good financial decision every single month. You just make the decision once. By putting the math on autopilot, you protect your future wealth from your present anxiety.
So what does this all mean? If we step back and look at the whole picture, mastering personal finance is not about being a mathematical genius.
Not at all.
It starts with a healthy dose of self-awareness, admitting our psychological biases, and recognizing the money optical illusions that trick our brains. From there, we build the muscle memory of the 50-30-20 budget to navigate life's roadblocks.
Exactly.
We attack our high-interest debt strategically, knowing when to leverage the math of the avalanche and when to rely on the psychology of the snowball. And finally, we harness the unstoppable force of compound interest through early, automated, low-cost investing.
It is a fundamental shift from being a reactive participant in your life to a proactive architect of your future. And before we close, I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over, building on that psychology of money we discussed at the very beginning.
Oh, I love final thought.
We talked about how your family's habits dictated your financial car seats. But I want you to look closely at your budget and consider how your childhood friendships and the socioeconomic status of your early peer groups are secretly dictating what you categorize as a need versus a want today.
Oh, that's fascinating.
Look at the things you consider absolute baseline requirements for your lifestyle. How much of that required spending is actually necessary, and how much of it is just you desperately trying to maintain a lifestyle illusion bit to satisfy someone else's expectations.
Wow.
Are you spending your hard-earned money today just to impress the ghosts of your past?
That is a question that requires some serious reflection. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Remember, you don't have to be a Jedi master to build generational wealth. You just have to stop letting the optical illusions drive the car. Take control of your financial future today, set up those automated systems, and we will